Hello friends, this video on anatomy of flowering plants part 7 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. So to start with, we'll talk about tracheids. So what are these tracheids? They are tubular structure which is very clear from this diagram. Now a small tip which I would like to give you is, since in biology we will talk about so many different things. When we talk about morphology or when we talk about anatomy, we talk about so many different structures, so many new names. So sometimes it becomes very difficult to remember the characteristics of each part of a plant, right? So it is always good to have the picture in mind. So if you recollect or if you try to understand the characteristics of tracheids looking at the picture, then it becomes easier to remember it. You don't get confused with what is a tracheid and what is a vessel, right? And that is why we show you so many pictures. Okay, now tracheids are tubular structures. The structure is almost like a tube, conduct water and minerals vertically. Now I think when we talk about xylem, the conduction is mostly vertical because the roots are at the below and all other parts of the plant is above. So the conduction of water and minerals has to happen upward. So that has to be in the vertical direction. So this tubular structures or tracheids actually conduct water and minerals vertically. These are dead cells without protoplasm. So what is protoplasm? It is nothing but the living matter or the fluid present inside the cell. The cytoplasm basically. So there is no cytoplasm. Now once the cell is dead, there are no cellular processes happening inside the cell. Correct? There is no respiration happening. There is no need of any of the cell organelles. So there is no protoplasm. The next one, that is vessel. What does it do? They are also tubular cells with little tapering ends. Okay, so the ends, it goes a little like this. I mean, they are not exactly the entire thing is of the same thickness, but towards the end it becomes little tapering. Now each vessel is made up of many cells and each cell is known as a vessel member. So many vessel members together form a vessel. These are lignified cell walls without protoplasm. Again, they also do not have protoplasm, so they are also dead cells. And the walls are lignified. That means lignin is present on the wall. Whenever lignin is something which actually makes the wall very strong. It increases the strength. So these vessels also have got strong cell walls. However, perforations are present. What are perforations? Perforations are small pore-like structures or small holes which are present on the walls of the vessels. Now, as I said, the walls are lignified. So the walls are made up of lignin, very strong walls, but they do have some holes. What is the purpose of the holes? Through these holes, the vessel members are interconnected. As I said, one vessel is made up of many vessel members. So when I say a vessel, so here in this picture, you actually see a vessel. Now this vessel is not one single vessel. This vessel is made up of many vessel members. So many vessel members constitutes one vessel. Now these many vessel members, so basically here you might wonder that there is no tapering end which I can see, because this itself is made up of many tube-like structures which are having tapering ends. So these perforations which you see, these perforations actually help the vessel members to interact with one another. Right? So that is the purpose of these perforations. The third one is xylem parenchyma. So what does it do? These are thin-walled living cells. So now again, these are parenchyma cells. So they are living cells. So now did you see one thing? What is parenchyma? Parenchyma is nothing but a simple permanent tissue. So here in xylem, one of the components is a parenchyma. So parenchyma cells are also one type of cell which is present inside xylem. So they are living cells as we discussed before also, and they are generally thin walled. The walls are not that thick. So here the cell walls, the thin cell wall is made up of cellulose. So it is like moderately rigid. They help in food storage. Parenchyma, the basic packing tissue, we talked about it before. Food storage is one of the important functions of parenchyma. They conduct water sideways. Now, just some time back I told you that when I talk about xylem, the conduction should be primarily vertically, but not always vertically, because there might be some plants where the plant is not that tall and long, right? There are some plants which grow horizontally. We have learned a lesson on diversity in living organisms, right? Where we talked about the plant kingdom, and we learned about a variety of plants. We talked about so many plants like stolones and suckers, runners. So we saw those plants, they do not grow vertically upwards, they grow horizontally. So when something is growing horizontally, if we say that the xylem is going to conduct only vertically, so what happens to those kind of plants which grow horizontally? So they are gone, they are dead. So there has to be some element which will conduct the water and minerals even sideways. So that is done by xylem parenchyma. Not only talking about those plants, even you consider a normal plant, we say that water and minerals will be conducted only vertically. In that case, what will happen? It will go up from roots to the stem. Now there are so many lateral branches here and there. So what happens to those lateral branches? For that you need to conduct water sideways as well. For example, this is a plant. Okay, these are the roots. So now water is getting conducted vertically. Now this plant will also have branches. Now these branches might also have sub-branches. Right? So now if you say that the water will only be conducted vertically, then how will the water get conducted sideways? Because even they need water and minerals, right? So both vertical conduction and sideways conduction are needed. So for the sideways conduction is xylem parenchyma, and for the vertical conduction is the tracheids. The fourth component is xylem fibers. These are nothing but they are only used for support, just to support. Right? So now we spoke about all the four elements. We saw that they all perform some specific function. Now how do they all synchronize their function? Now as a whole, xylem. So what is the function of xylem? As I mentioned before, the function of xylem is to conduct water and minerals from roots to all other parts of the plant. Now in order to do that, it needs to conduct water vertically from roots to upward. For that we have tracheids. It also needs to conduct water sideways so that all the lateral branches can get it. So for that we have xylem parenchyma. Now you also need to support the plant. A basic support to the plant is always needed, because as the plant grows, the need for support keeps on increasing, right? So for that we have xylem fibers. So each of these elements performing a particular function, but all together they are performing the entire function of the xylem, right? So that is how xylem is a complex tissue. Okay, so with this I think the structure and function of xylem is quite clear. Another important point to note here is gymnosperms lack vessels in their xylem. So there are no vessels in gymnosperms, because gymnosperms do not have flowers, right? Gymnosperms are like pine, deodar, they are all gymnosperms where we do not have flowers. So such plants do not have vessel. That is one important point to be noted here. We'll now talk about protoxylem and metaxylem. So this is another concept which comes into picture, because there is one xylem which is formed before and there is another xylem which is formed in the later stages of a plant life cycle. So that is why we have two different terms, protoxylem and metaxylem. So let us see what are they. Protoxylem is the first formed primary xylem. So the first formed xylem is the protoxylem. It has a smaller lumen. So when I say smaller lumen, what is lumen? Lumen is basically the inside cavity of a tube-like structure. For example, this is a tube. This is another tube. So both are tube, right? But here the lumen is small. So this space which you have inside the tube, that is referred to as the lumen. Here this is the lumen. So this is a narrower lumen, whereas this is a wider lumen. Now when I talk about protoxylem, they have narrow lumen, smaller lumen. So protoxylem can be represented something like this. The next one is metaxylem, that is the later formed primary xylem. So both are primary xylem. Now you might again have a question in your mind, what is this primary xylem and secondary xylem now? So that will become clear after some time. So for now you just know that okay, primary xylem is the only thing that exists. What is secondary xylem? That we'll discuss later. So in primary xylem itself, there are two stages. One is earlier formed, which is protoxylem. The one which is formed later is the metaxylem. And this metaxylem has a larger lumen. So it is somewhat like this, a wider lumen. So it will look somewhat like this, bigger lumen. Correct? Okay. Now again, there can be different types of arrangements of protoxylem and metaxylem. Now when we talk about the internal structure of different plant parts, like the internal structure of the root or the stem, we see that the protoxylem and the metaxylem are arranged in some specific fashion. So basically there are two possible arrangements of protoxylem and metaxylem. The first one is endarch, and the second one is exarch. So these are the two possible arrangements of protoxylem and metaxylem. Now what happens in endarch is the protoxylem lies inside the metaxylem. What does that mean? That means the protoxylem is towards the center and the metaxylem is towards the periphery. So that is when it is possible that the protoxylem lies inside the metaxylem. Correct? So in this case, it would be something like this. Let us suppose these are the protoxylem, and outside the protoxylem would be the metaxylem. So here basically the metaxylem is towards the periphery or towards the boundary, and the protoxylem is towards the center. Right? So this arrangement is known as endarch. Now when I talk about exarch, it is just the opposite. So exarch, X means outside. So here the protoxylem lies outside metaxylem. So that means the smaller ones will be outside and the bigger ones will be inside. So the metaxylem would be towards the center and the protoxylem would be towards the periphery. An arrangement like this. Now you might ask, where is its application? I mean, where do you actually see such arrangements? Like that it is arranged in this way and that way. So where do you actually see them? So now the answer to that is, when we will talk about the internal structure of a root or the internal structure of a stem, this is the arrangement that is exarch. This is the arrangement which you will see in root, whereas this is the arrangement that is endarch, which you will see in stem. So when we will talk about just remember this in your mind, when we will talk about the internal structure of stem, you will actually see that the metaxylem is outside the protoxylem, and when we talk about the root, we will see that the protoxylem is outside the metaxylem. So these are the two different types of arrangements of protoxylem and metaxylem. Okay. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.